Across the Spider-Verse is the greatest movie I've ever seen. It's brain-rotted me so hard you'd think I was possessed by John Romita Sr. And with the cliffhanger ending that we got, I've been consuming fan art, fan theories, concept art, behind the scenes, basically anything I could get my hands on. I'm like a little goblin, stealing and grabbing pieces of gold and loot to put in my little sack and run away with. But as I sift through all of this information, I keep coming across a singular story, repeated over and over again. You might have heard it if you are in the Spider-Man fandom or the Community fandom. And it's that Donald Glover is the reason we have Miles Morales. I keep seeing it everywhere, especially on TikTok, and I consistently see fans say, this is why he had such an extensive cameo in Across the Spider-Verse. However, I don't think that's true, and I'm going to try and prove it within a reasonable doubt. But before I can debunk this theory, I have to, I guess bunk the theory. So let's go over how this original concept came to be, what the timeline is, why I think it's wrong, and why I think it's important. This is where I'd put the sponsor for today's video, but I don't have one, so please press all those buttons so I can make my rant. Okay, so the general premise is that after Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, Sony was looking to recast Peter Parker for Mark Webb's The Amazing Spider-Man series. Donald Glover found himself fit for the role and tried to throw his hat in the ring, getting hashtag Donald for Spider-Man trending, a sort of viral internet campaign. And viral it was, trending on Twitter at #1 for nearly a full day, and even getting support from people like Stan Lee. Sony, as we all know, decided to go with Andrew Garfield for two very meh films, even though I think he was a great Peter Parker. Donald, though, at the time was playing Troy Barnes in Community, so him and the writers came up with an end credits scene gag. The gag was that basically Donald Glover's character, Troy Barnes, who's pretty much just a himbo, would wake up from a dream wearing Spider-Man pajamas before going, "Aw man." This was a tongue-in-cheek reference to how Donald Glover himself dreamed of being Spider-Man before being awoken, not getting the part. Be it by coincidence or maybe even fate, Marvel writer Brian Michael Bendis ended up seeing the episode and had a moment of inspiration, a eureka, and decided, I should create a black Spider. The theory explains then that it's for this reason why we see Donald Glover repeatedly turn up in references, cameos, or characters in Miles Morales' media. He played Miles Morales in the first ever cartoon appearance in Ultimate Spider-Man. He was a reference in Into the Spider-Verse, a cameo in Across the Spider-Verse, and literally played Aaron Davis in MCU Spider-Man. As an eternal reward for creating such a character that is so beloved, he will always be given a part or some such as a way of paying him back. Though too old to play Miles now, he's usually given a position of Aaron Davis or the Prowler. See, the first thing that irked me about this theory is that when you actually put Miles Morales and Donald Glover side by side, they don't seem all too similar. Miles doesn't look like Donald Glover, and he doesn't act much like him or his Community counterpart. So I decided to dig deeper, find out what Brian Michael Bendis might have said about this eureka moment, this moment of inspiration. Although I can't find the actual article because USA Today's website sucks, I did find a surviving quote. He looked fantastic. I saw him in the costume and I thought, I would like to read that book. So I was glad I was writing that book. But wait a minute. That gives off the idea that he was already writing the book before he saw the episode. Buddy, the hole's about to get a whole lot deeper, because when I looked into it more, I found Alex Alonso, the Marvel editor-in-chief at that time, stated that the real catalyst was the Obama administration. When we were planning Ultimatum, we realized that we were standing at the brink of America electing its first African-American president, and we acknowledged that maybe it was time to take a good look at one of our icons. Wait, so this means though, definitively, that although in his early stages, Miles was created 3 years before that Community episode, therefore proving that Donald Glover is not the reason that we have Miles Morales. But let me tell you this. This connection to Obama helped put a lot of puzzle pieces in place. I even found an article that explained that Miles' mixed-race heritage came from an inspiration of Obama's mixed-race heritage. Miles is Afro-Latino, referencing and incorporating Alex Alonso's Latino background. Another thing is that for some reason they decided to put Obama in an Amazing Spider-Man comic, like front cover and all. It was a week before his inauguration, and it was because Obama's favorite superhero was the wall crawler. And I think they looked to Obama as a sort of inspiration for the character they wanted to make. And although I can't prove it, Miles Morales in the Spider-Verse movies has a very different hairstyle, made to reference Rio Morales and his Afro-Latino heritage. But in the original comics and the PlayStation games, Miles has a far tighter skin fade, which I think is supposed to be more of a reference to 2008 Obama's hair. Now, while researching, another thing that came up a lot was Brian Michael Bendis' daughters as writing inspiration. Black adopted daughters who had been inspiration for famous characters like Riri Ironheart, who'd been in literal MCU movies like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, or even DC's Naomi, so surely Miles too would be incorporated in this. And although that might have happened later on, during the actual creation stage of Miles, he did not have those daughters at that time. Sadly though, this is where the trail gets cold. I found myself drowning in a sea of articles from gamer nerd news and comic nerd news, just repeating the same things in a USA Today article that I couldn't read. But nevertheless, I think we can clearly see that Miles' major points weren't constructed by Donald Glover, and his minor points were filled in by Marvel's own staff. Okay, so what are you saying then? That Donald Glover added nothing? That he was just a fun tale, just a fun myth that we've bigged up far beyond what it ever should have been? I don't think so. I think the truth is probably more complicated and a lot more plain. Shane McDuffie, creator and writer of basically every single superhero TV media that you watched as a kid, talked at length about how hard it was to have POC heroes and how having too many was considered pushing an agenda. Look at basically every single Marvel movie. You will see 1,000 comments talking about woke diversity, leftist ideology. It is exhausting. For Brian Michael Bendis, it must have been terrifying to be writing a story about Peter Parker, an American symbol and a beloved hero for many, being straight up replaced by a younger black man. Sure, there had been offshoots in Elseworlds and What Ifs, but this was Marvel's ultimate comic series line. It was made to be the one that you could jump in if you would just start watching the MCU. So I think for him, seeing Donald Glover in the suit, seeing how much support there was from fans everywhere, it helped push him forward and give him the confidence that he needed to make something great that we all love today. Turns out my camera died and you couldn't see like the top of my head for the entire video. Okay, so Donald didn't make Miles, but he helped a bit. Who cares? Whatever, man. You might think I'm being a hater or I'm just being anal, but I seriously think that there's more to it. The reason that this is so important to me is that when we develop and we pass around these creative narratives that X made Y, that Peter Jackson made Lord of the Rings, or that George Lucas made Star Wars, we ignore all the amazing creatives that were underneath them, making the movie magic for the movies that are magical. And when we do that, we end up with the prequels. And I know some of you might like them, but they're not as good as the originals, and that's because Star Wars isn't just him. It is my worry that when we have done this so often and so consistently, that it comes as no surprise that we are where we are today. Between all the nerdy Reddit AI tech bros stealing art, writers on strike begging for fair compensation for the work that they do, to be paid for when their shows go on super billion-dollar platforms. I've seen the movie 3 times myself. It was made by so many amazing animators, but nobody tells me about them. They constantly just tell me about how Donald Glover is the reason we have Miles Morales, and he's the reason we have this movie. I love this movie a lot. I've seen the credits twice, but I can't tell you one animator who's worked on it. I don't think most people can. There's something profoundly sad about a movie that is a love letter to animation and all of its mediums, not having one animator to be remembered for it.